What makes for a great place? Is it about the look and feel of the building? Or is it how the interiors are designed? Or is it the people that come there and the people that hang out there? Or, I don't know, is it the artwork on the walls? I don't know, is it the fountains? Is it the smells? Is it the music that they pipe in? Is it the other people that you're with in the place? Well, I don't know. I guess personally, for me, it's about all of those things and probably more than just that stuff that I listed off the top of my head. But how do you get all of those elements to work together in the right way to make a wonderful place? Well, our guest today has literally written the book on this. So we're going to find out. Kevin Kelley is an architect and author of Irreplaceable: How to Create Extraordinary Places That Bring People Together. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. And welcome, Kevin Kelley. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
So, Kevin, I know you're an architect. You're based out of Los Angeles. Are you joining us from LA today?
I am. Just right off Melrose Avenue, the kind of famous Melrose place that we all might remember from the 90s.
Yeah. I certainly do. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Not that I was there. I watched it on TV.
Yeah, me too. I wasn't here then. I was in North Carolina.
So, Kevin, I was so excited to read your book, Irreplaceable. And also, I love the design of it. It looks really cool.
Thank you.
What was the career path that led you to write this book?
You know, I'm an architect and I try not to be biased that place is important to me and design is important to me. I try to be objective. I work for a lot of well-known companies that have many different ways of competing and succeeding and managing. And I get to hear all those issues about, what it takes to become a success. But around 2008, 2010, we started noticing fundamental behavior shifting and how people walked, made eye contact with each other, became more present to each other and engaged with their environments, not only retail environments, really other types of venues, orchestras, colleges, classrooms, urban districts. And it started me down a path of wondering, is place needed? Do we actually have to have place? And we might all remember all the headlines that said, software eats retail, malls are dead, retail apocalypse, on and on. And so it really, created a question in me. Is place essential? Many people are calling it a relic of the past and dinosaurs. But I really started looking and examining deeply how environment affects our behavior, our ability to cooperate and socialize with others. And that's what really led me to dig deep into this. What happens in a world where there's no retail? And we all might remember that film WALL-E, which was a world that people sat in their pajamas and lazy boys and had everything brought to them. That's not so farcical now, right? There's something present about that topic.
So let's think about your book as a way to avoid having WALL-E become a reality. All right. Well, this is not the Just the James show today. This is a book club. So I have two fellow readers and I'm going to welcome in my two friends. First, we've got Anna Leon. She's the Director of Retail Real Estate Research for Nuveen.
Thank you for having me
Welcome,
today.
Anna.
Kevin, so excited to chat about the book.
Thank you, Anna. I have great respect for what you do.
And we've also got Laura Fullington. She's the Vice President for Insight and Analytics with Tanger.
Similarly, Laura.
Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Great.
Excited to talk through the book today.
Yeah, so these are folks who are thinking about retail and mixed use and what makes for a good place. So I feel like this is a really good resonant audience for your book. We've all enjoyed reading it. I don't know, Laura, what's something that jumped out to you that you might want to ask Kevin about?
Oh, I mean, there's so many parts and pieces of this book I was intrigued by. Um, I really liked, as you led into the book and your one big use case around the Grove,
Right.
and you use that in so many instances with so many clients as this great this great example, right, to lean into. But I also was kind of curious to hear more about this experience value proposition and the work payoff ratio that you talk about. You call it like the 2-second rule.
Yeah.
But like maybe you could tell us in our audience like a little bit more about these concepts and maybe how it ties to when you think about the Grove and using that as your one really great example.
Great question. Um, you know, because I work heavily with large retail brands, the value proposition is everything. Everybody kind of fixates on getting that value proposition just right. And up until online shopping came available, most of that worked. But the second we got options for buying mattresses on Google, which there's 8 million options, or buying leather couches or leather jackets online, that value proposition started to change. The value equation became different. And it is truly one of the biggest fundamental changes we've had. And every time I would talk to companies, particularly those with a physical building or a venue or an experience as part of their business model, they would not factor in that going to a place requires more work than ordering online. It requires navigation, parking, weather, all kind of other issues. And they tended to forget that. And they weren't empathetic to what consumers had to go through in a busy day. And the thing that really became the biggest issue, and I think the hardest thing for retailers to accept, is that if you have a physical venue, you're going to have a very hard time competing with online on price, variety, or convenience. That is the battle we just had to let go, and we have to compete on other dimensions. Amazon doesn't have a monopoly on joy, delight, discovery, social interaction, social bliss. And what I'm really trying to show retailers is you need to compete on these other factors. And so I want them to keep reminding them with the experience value proposition that they have an experience as part of their business model. And they need to really make sure that payoff is higher than the work that's involved. As it relates to the Grove, and I could have used many different shopping centers around the country, but the Grove in Los Angeles is a fascinating case study because it was built at the same time another major mall was going off, one of the largest retail disasters in the 1990s and early 2000s, called Hollywood and Highland. It had a lot of big money invested in it and city money, but the Grove was this small project. Everybody wondered whether it would work. I lived right across the street from it, and even I wondered whether it would work. But what's amazing about that place is that it has 3 different audiences that come and go. It has locals, it has tourists, and it has the built-in workforce. And it never fails to deliver on creating this incredible experience, no matter what. I've been going to that place, as many other people that I know, once a week, every year for 20 years. And I'm not going there because I need to get the new socks at Gap or buy a new pair of khakis at Banana Republic. I'm going there for the sense of a temporary community. You can go in there and plug into this place so quickly and have a synchronicity with other people that is very hard to get elsewhere. And you can see it in the behaviors. One of the most ideal behaviors we see at the Grove is meandering and milling, which is a concept we've kind of lost in a lot of places. So it's a great example of thinking about every aspect of what's involved in going to a place. What do we consider work and what do we consider payoffs? Work could be escalators, elevators, parking decks, social cooperation. All those things really kind of wear us out. But the payoff, the experience you get, that social bliss is just phenomenal.
Just a quick
it's interesting.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, just quick follow-up. you're talking to, I think you two and I think Anna and Laura and I have probably been to the Grove together at some
Absolutely.
point, but a mixed audience. So for folks that aren't aware, in just like, what's the elevator pitch for the Grove and what it is and what makes it different for somebody who hasn't been there?
It's a 500,000 square foot outdoor shopping center with a great boulevard that cuts through it, a trolley that runs up and down a little short track. It has an old farmer's market at one end of it that's historical. And it is, many people call it their happy place.
Yeah.
It seems like that, right? You talk about like removing friction and pain points, but in certain, right, ideas of creating places, it's almost less of removing, but maybe softening making the experience override some of these friction and pain points.
That's correct.
And it feels like throughout the book, you've got a lot of great ideas and toolkits and kind of philosophies. I think it was chapter 10 where you talked about the innovation toolkit, building strategy or game plan. Thinking about more than just the Grove, but all the different types of retail real estate places that you've touched and how this kind of innovation toolkit has helped you think through a lot of these use cases and what goes into that toolkit.
Yeah. I think you hit on the head, and that is this idea of friction. And places have been trying to compete with online, thinking they could come close to it, but the limits of friction of place are just going to be higher. I mean, the ruthless efficiency of online just cuts out so much of that friction. And what we haven't really considered is that some friction is good in life. That's okay. And some effort is good in life. And we're so obsessed with how fast and how ruthlessly efficient we can do things when we're not really considering the quality and fidelity of those friction moments. Writing a handwritten card to my wife on an anniversary takes more effort than AI, but there's something about it that means something. Walking to school with my kid as opposed to learning online is a different experience. Meeting other students in school is different than just learning online. And it's not that I believe one replaces the other. I think we just have to have a balance and think about that maybe it's not friction, maybe it's convening, or maybe it's interacting or socializing. Something happened to us for thousands of years on the way to the market. We'd bump into neighbors. We'd have accidental encounters. I mean, how many stories have you heard about people that met their significant other by accident at the market or at another place? And we're kind of Xing out these things. And to put a metric on it, we're spending upwards to 7.5, 8.5 hours a day in front of a screen. That is time we're not out in public or out with others. And this is increasing.
So Anna, what jumped out at you from that you might want to ask Kevin
Sure.
about
so
the book?
Kevin, I think you have like a really good balance on this call. I would say Laura's in that thinking category, and I'm probably more in that feeling category. And so you kind of talk about places like the Grove that for me, it's a place that just evokes joy. I don't think about the parking. I don't think about how crowded the farmer's market is. Couldn't tell you what stores are there. I could tell you what I ate, and how I love every time that train goes by. But when you go to the other end of the spectrum of a retail experience, like say going to the grocery store, you've done a lot of work with grocers across America in different regions. And I've seen some of your work, and it's very creative. And I think for, products that are as commoditized as food and beverage, packaged goods, how do you use design to make that experience at the supermarket less painful, and less of a chore and more enjoyable, and something that is something that you would want to do?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I don't want to make this a battle of online versus physical place. I want to be clear. I will use it as an example because online is really leading. It's doing some amazing things. When I say leading, it's certainly leading in terms of investment, attracting investment to places, and physical places have certainly been getting beat up on a lot. But inherent in this dynamic is this force towards commoditization, almost debranding. That is where we're getting more and more, where we're strip mining a lot of these differences that that online is really focusing on and convincing you that there is no difference. Why go to the store? What's in it? What's in it for you? Why would you do that? And so we have to find ways to increase that value proposition and to surround it with other things. So it can't just be a box of Tide or a tube of Crest. We have to say, what else do you get? And that's the argument I make, and I try to prove it with numbers that consumers are willing to pay a slight premium to have other features, such as in the Mexican Mercado concept that you probably have heard about that we did in Costa Mesa. It's an enormous success. You can go there and have a full sit-down meal. You can have sit at the tequila bar. You can learn about rituals and traditions of ancient Mexican food traditions. This is different than ordering something and having it dropped off in front of your house. And so these are the ways that we're trying to help people compete. Now, if I truly believed that, the primary goal was just to acquire products at the cheapest, quickest, most convenient price possible, if that was our only human drive, that's kind of a rational drive, I'd be okay with that. But I don't think that is our only human need. I think we have other human needs that need to be fulfilled. And those needs need to be particularly fulfilled when we have our base needs met. We're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's been many other types of frameworks that look at the other needs we have to socialize, to bond, to connect. And so I've been trying to show retailers how to do that. And sometimes they have to let go of certain commodity products. They have to get into other categories that are differentiated, or they have to niche.
I was interested, the example that jumped into my head when you were asking about grocery was the chain in Canada. Is it in Alberta, the family chain?
Yeah, Friesen.
Tell me, Friesen. So you kind of you met with them and kind of interviewed them and took their family values and translated it into the store. Talk about that process. I found it fascinating.
Yeah, and I think it applies to just about everyone. And it ties into the question that you were kind of hitting on, Anna, and that I wish there was enough room for all of us to compete on price, variety, and convenience. If there was, we could all build a market and do okay. But unfortunately, nationally, regionally, and even locally, there's generally one or two players, or maybe three nationally, that will dominate that, and everybody else will try to figure out what to do. A lot of times that means merging or being acquired, or just pulling up stakes, which has been happening in grocery at a rapid level over the last 15 years. And so when I show up day one to meet with a grocery retailer, let's talk about that. And I work with the big internationals, the nationals, and the locals. But when I work with a regional chain, the hard reality is I'll first interview them with a whole team that we bring in. And the reality is they can't win. They can't win on price. They can't win on convenience. They can't win on variety. They can't win on efficiency. And that's a hard thing for them to hear. We have to really let them go through that. And then they wonder, what can they win on? What are the other specifications? What I find with almost every company I meet, every leader I meet, is there's something they care about, something they really believe in, but are afraid to reveal. They oftentimes won't tell people that because they're like, well, that's my personal ideas. But that's what I really want to try to convince them is your personal ideas matter. And what we need to find out from each client is, what do you care about? And where do your cares match with your customers' cares? And there's not been a market that I've gone into, or an industry I've gone into, that I can't find the nexus of those two cares. But sometimes it takes some digging to find that. In the case of Friesen Brothers in Canada, they were a famous chain doing really well for many generations until the international players came in and started changing that dynamic. So when I get stuck at that point and I can't find a hook, something to work on, I will ask my client, can I come to your home? And Frank Loveson thought, you want to come to my home? I was like, yeah, I'd love to come to your house for dinner. And he thought it was odd, but he was intrigued. He invited me to dinner. And when I walked in his house, he had all these pictures on the wall. And one picture in particular was him as a 20-year-old meat cutter. And he said something to me that gives me the anomaly. That's what you always need in innovation, is an anomaly. And he said, well, that's when I was a butcher, and the idea of butchering is gone. I was like, what do you mean it's gone? He goes, oh, it's a lost art. No, there's no butchers anymore. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Tell me about that. And then he started telling me about what he cares about, what being a butcher is. He told me all of Canadian grocery stores buy American box beef. They don't actually butcher anymore. They do a charade and wear the outfit. They're not really butchering. We drilled into that. Now I have 6 other anomalies that I could go in, and I won't get into each of those, that I learned just from being in his home. And I could tell you 30 more stories of not only local or regional companies, but international companies where we find that anomaly by digging into what people personally care about, what they're willing to fight for, what they believe in. My job is to get them to reveal those cares.
And so then how did that translate into the final store?
Okay. That's the great part. So in addition to finding out that he had this belief about the lost art of butchery, I went into his kitchen and his wife was making strudel, and she was rolling out dough with a newspaper underneath the strudel. I said, what's that about? And she said, well, the way I was taught to make apple strudels, it has to be so clear you can read a newspaper underneath it. I was like, wow, that's interesting. Then one of their uncles came by, and his name was Bange. And Bange's focus was on, he liked smoking wild animals, exotic, animals. And it was a very interesting thing. And we thought, what if we, he was serious about beef, and they're serious about beef. What if we built a smokehouse in the store? And what if we, instead of buying American box beef, we actually created our own brand called Alberta beef, and created our own brand about it? And what if we started focusing on dough and breads and other things, and building a whole brand of customized proprietary products they care about, really the craft of food? And so we weren't even going to try to even come close to winning on price, variety, or convenience. Well, that store is on fire. They're Canada's #1 store. They've won gold. They're the coolest store in Canada now, not by me, by their own critics and organizations. So it's an amazing success story of competing on other dimensions than just price, variety, and convenience.
That's so cool.
That is cool. It reminds me of Wegmans. I grew up back east, and Wegmans, amazing job, and prepared foods and their own private label brands and creations, and delivering on so many amenities. When I moved to Phoenix, and I'm like, where's my Wegmans? I really miss that,
Wegmans is an amazing chain. Yeah.
That example of them being in that category of creating that place. I mean, we go there, and, you see high school friends, parents of high school friends. And even when I left, my parents would still be wandering around being, I saw your old soccer coach, or I found out what so-and-so's doing, and I ran into, so like that idea of still having that place, that community, that, that place where people run into each other and convene.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's what kind of prompted a lot of the book too, is my irritation that all we care about is the kind of linear concrete aspects of life. And you see this continual focus on this, but in the book, I talk about we are emotional beings, all of us. I use an analogy in the book of Cecil and Nina. My father's Cecil, who's very pragmatic. My mom's Nina. And this isn't about gender because it flips in all different types of places. But, I kind of lived in a household with Archie Bunker and Martha Stewart, trying to decorate a room together or plan a future home. And so I learned a lot about both sides, and I have respect for both sides. But as human beings, we need our emotions, and we need our emotional potential. to feel places and to feel other people in those places. And in the book, I describe how to tap into those things. That emotional potential is there all the time. And what's fascinating to me is that brands like Wegmans they run their own race. They create their own industry, but it's not just Wegmans, it's HEB and this new Mercado concept that I mentioned to you and other brands around the country. There are other ways to compete. And I guess where this gets bigger to me is when you think about the concept of America and a free market economy and capitalism and American dream. I want a way for many different entities to succeed. And if we get to the point, which we're dangerously approaching now, where the cost of doing business is cheaper for only the big companies, and there's no way that a small company can compete, what kind of country does that make us? We need, just like a jungle or an aquarium, we need a diverse ecosystem of small, medium, and large concepts. But we are flirting dangerously closer to that. I'm in the field every day with retailers, both grocery and traditional retailers, but we'll use grocery as an example. They will tell me their best price is still 9 to 12 points higher than the big major three food conglomerates. And this is changing where we're at. And I don't think the public is aware of the path we're heading down. I want to just make sure we have enough diversity in our ecosystem for all players to compete. So a big part of our mission at our firm is to try to help others find other dimensions that they can compete and win in.
That's so cool. Yeah, one of the things I love most about traveling is going to whatever the local thing is that they don't have anywhere else, and I would hate for us to lose that.
We already have that in our surveys. We do. You will talk, we talk to customers who say, I live in Seattle, I went to Florida and I saw the exact same stores, or I went to this part of the country and that part. The homogeneity it's a kind of death for our brain, and that we need variation. It's how our senses work.
I find your research methodology incredibly thorough. Most recently, what's like the most interesting things that you've heard, observations or comments from consumers and your clients?
I have to think about that. I guess what I'm surprised at, and even though I believe it, and it's certainly the dope that I sell, I'm really surprised how much people are craving experiences and going out of their way to have them. And there's been some recent press around, experience angst, and that really relates more to concerts. But I'm surprised at how much young people are focusing on experiences, and it gives me hope. Our youth get beat up so much as the people that changed our value system, but it's really the boomers. The boomers invented a lot of these technologies. They're benefiting from it. And statistically, they're the ones sitting in bed, spending a lot of time doom scrolling. It's young people that are actually the ones that grew up with cell phones that are looking for ways to have something else. And they're the ones resurrecting record players, cocktails, malls, bowling, other gathering spots. Now, admittedly, this is not at mass scale, but they're certainly leading the edge and kind of showing us a different way to live. And I think that's because each generation has this innate drive to course correct society. They look at their parents and what their parents did, and they're like, I want to change. And we take it for granted how difficult it must be to meet friends and significant others, right? And what role place played in helping facilitate that and foster that.
So, Kevin, you spend a lot of time, or your firm does, watching people and how they interact with retail environments. What are you looking for? Like, what do you tell people? Hey, or what are you looking for how people interact in those environments?
Yeah, I am a professional voyeur, and I have spent my entire life observing people, and I often have to bring in young staff, very intelligent, very accomplished staff, to a site, typically a venue, whether it be an urban district, an orchestra, a retail store, a steak buffet chain, which I use in the book. And we will sit down. I will get lawn chairs and sit in a parking lot, or I will sit inside a booth inside a restaurant. And my younger staff will sometimes go, "What are we doing?" And they almost go crazy. They start sketching. And I'm like, what are you sketching? And they're like, I'm coming up with ideas. And I'm like, we haven't even figured out the problem yet. And they're like, well, I don't see anything. And I'm like, well, if you stop talking, we'll see. And sometimes we have to wait days for something to come. And your question, what are we looking for? And I mentioned earlier, we're looking for trends, patterns, and anomalies. And this will sound very bizarre, but it almost always starts with some bizarre observation. It'll be that, have we noticed everybody has book bag, or that everybody's driving Honda Accords, or everyone has a beard? And we'll start looking at those trends, and then we drill those down, kind of like if you remember Columbo, he would just keep looking for those leads. And I know one of your questions, understandably might be, do you have an example? And the work we did for Harley Davidson, this is going back a couple years when the internet was really transforming their business. Most dealerships, in addition to selling motorcycles and jackets, they also have to sell parts and accessories, which is a big part of their business model. They also have to service motorcycles. They fall under something called automotive law, and they have a lot of requirements of what they have to do. But the internet started wiping out the accessory business, all the different things. And a Harley customer might add $9,000 worth of accessories to their motorcycle in the multiple years of having a bike. That's the part I didn't want to do, because I was like, I don't know if I can solve that. They had me doing many assignments, like, our number one goal is for you to fix the parts and accessories area. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. So I hung out in dealerships all over the United States with my team, watching people in the store and eavesdropping. Harley did something very interesting in that they always had somebody, an attractive person at the front door of the place. And I would watch people walk in and just blow right past the man or woman and go right to the parts area. And they kept trying to talk to the parts guy. And I'm like, what are they trying to talk to the parts guy about? And the parts guy is supposed to be back there filing and storing stuff. It was almost like, I don't know, they were trying to date or something. They just kept trying to talk. And then it dawned on me, because I listened to the oral stories they would tell. They would tell stories about people that got in wrecks and things that happened. They'd be like, so-and-so got sidewiped on the road by an old person. Gas went everywhere. I mean, I was terrified. I was listening to stuff, and they go, but you know what? He's still riding, or she's still riding. And what I realized was the parts person is the MacGyver. They know everything about the motorcycle. They can put it together, take it apart, but they also know what happened. And the types of people that were running to the back of the store weren't the super experienced rider. They were the rider trying to move up in the culture. And they didn't know how to move up. And the parts guy was the key person who could help them move up in this culture, this subculture of Harley world. What we call, midlife crisis males fading in strength, seeking the end of loneliness. And we started kind of watching that. And a long story, I know, but you'd go, well, what do we do with that? Well, we always look for comparative models. We're like, well, where else does this dynamic happen? And we realize it happens in bars. Oftentimes at bar, you'll see a bunch of people. You don't sit at a bar and drink for free. You have to buy a drink, and you have conversation. But the bartender knows who got fired, who got a drink in their face, who's cheating, what's happening. And we thought, what if we changed the parts person to a parts tender? And what if we made the parts area like a bar? What if we built bar stools and put all the product there, and you couldn't sit there unless you bought something, just like a bar? 3,000 dealers jumped on that immediately. We had 21 insights, very similar. That was the one they jumped on immediately. And we just started changing that drab Maytag repairman parts area to a bar, a parts bar and a parts tender. Sorry for the long story, but that's kind of how we will look at anomalies. And I don't think I've ever had a job in 33 years that I don't find it. Some come on day one and some come 3 months later.
Love
That's
that.
fascinating.
Again, I apologize for the length.
No, that's what we're here
It's a
for.
fun story.
Yeah.
With a good outcome.
Yeah. I mean, and now if you go to the dealerships that adopt it, which is an enormous amount, it's just funny to see all these guys pulled up and guys and gals sitting at the bar stool talking to MacGyver, and go through this thing and sharing things and then buying fuzzy dice and keychains and all these other things, which tells you, and particularly in this kind of, if you look through society, we're all trying to figure out the end of loneliness, right? There's plenty of statistical studies that prove being online all the time is making us lonely and feel isolated. And sometimes just going to the market gives us a sense that we belong to something and people, we have interactions. Well, this particular subculture in the Harley world, that end of loneliness really happens there. And they get to bond and become part of a tribe that makes them feel important. I mentioned in the book, in the intro, a guy named Ernie. And Ernie, that's where I get all our ideas from, is just talking to customers casually. And Ernie said to me, he said, I'm 50 something years old. My wife figured her life out. She's got friends and church and she does things. My kids are grown. He's like, what am I going to do? He said, am I going to surf the internet all day or go to a bar and drink? He said, no. So what he ended up doing was going to different Harley stores all over Southern California each day. And he goes, but I can't buy something every time. So that's why I go to different stores. That helped me realize we need to make Ernie feel welcome all the time. And we weren't, the bike isn't what we should be selling. We should be selling that end of loneliness, that sense of community in the parking lots. And so we started building bonfires in the parking lots. And again, making the store welcome to interact and foster other relationships. And we have pivotal moments where we see people exchange numbers, which is so powerful. How you watch the dogs being washed in a window, you see poodles being washed. We looked at that idea and then did that in the service area, put a little window in as people got their bikes cleaned up and fixed. You'd be amazed at how many riders sit down and exchange email and phone numbers and then go on a ride together. That is such a great quality that retail can do for people.
Kevin, do these all these projects you work on, like, I love the story, I love the concept, I love the work that's done, the research. At the end of the day, does this translate into increase in sales, more dollars for the operator?
All of it. Yeah. So I was smart enough to know as soon as I started, and really in college, that the problem with the design profession in general, and I'm an architect, but I'm critical of architecture, is that it's very subjective. If you look at all the award winners for restaurants and other types of things, it's very subjective. It's typically intellectual, abstract, and elitist. I joked when I was in college that most architects were trying to make the world Grey Poupon eaters when they're French eaters, or trying to make them brie eaters when we're all Velveeta eaters. And what I couldn't understand is why we don't meet people where they're at. Why do we have to always take them to a modern glass house? If people like Lincoln log houses or traditional houses or Jeffersonian houses, why don't we meet them where they're at? And so my profession is obsessed with style, but I was very interested in behavior. At the end of the day, though, I had to find a metric. I had to be able to measure that. And so the easiest way to measure that is through cash register sales. But I also tried to add dimensions to that. So it's cash register sales, dwell times, experimentation, average basket size, frequency of visits. Those are the dimensions I'm super interested in, and getting a metric for every one of those. There's not a project that we do that we don't expect at minimum an increase of 25% in sales. And we're typically not changing the product, the price, the variety, or the service level. We're only changing the environment. The most compelling case studies I can show any business group is to go, you're not aware of how much environment affects behavior, but I'm going to show you 5 case studies here quickly to show you, again, we're not going to change anything other than the environment. So minimum 25%, on average around 85% is what we're able to get. But I have case studies where we get 600% increase in sales just by changing the environment. It is the thing we don't realize is that the joke I kind of think about is An older fish asks a younger fish, how's the water? And younger fish says, what's water? We have the same thing about how's the environment? How's your surrounding? We take for granted that we're in a place all time. We're never unplaced. Even when we're doom scrolling, we're always in a place, and that place is in us as much as we're in it. And if you're living bad places, like eating bad junk food, your quality of life suffers. But if you live in healthy places, your quality of life enhances, your ability to socialize, your sense of belonging. And so we're always in a place, but we're just not aware of it. And why aren't we aware of it? The brain has plenty of other things to deal with. So we delegate those decisions of being in place to our senses. Our senses make most of our decisions throughout the day. It decides where to walk. It decides what to do with our involuntary eye and involuntary sound or involuntary smells. We can't turn our smell off. And that's because our brain is operating on around a 60-watt light bulb, and it has to reduce energy. When we do have to engage the brain in an environment, say like furniture shopping or going to a theme park, it's exhausting to us. It wears us out so much that then our performance goes down on a variety of levels. But there are places that actually rejuvenate our senses. Whole Foods for many years did an excellent job of getting people to feel inspired. Bass Pro Shops or Apple stores, Wegmans you mentioned, they do a great job of filling our battery, which is our sensory battery. So yes, tracking sales is absolute minimum. I'm embarrassed if we don't increase sales at minimum 25%, but I'm aiming for 85 to 600%.
Is there some convincing to do, or have you had some organizational resistance at first that, where you've had to overcome some of those challenges and proving out that
always
25% or more?
Always. It's kind of this predictable chart that we have. We don't have a marketing director or barely a website or brochure. 95% of work comes through referrals, and I'll get a call from a company that says, I don't know what you do. I don't understand what you do, but I'm told I need to talk to you. We'll come in and they're skeptics, understandably, and I'm making fun, but they're spreadsheet driven skeptics that don't believe in emotions, that kind of Archie Bunker kind of style. And they're very supply side thinkers, because the history of retail has been about supply side management and logistics. And I see very few demand side thinkers at the boardroom level or the strategy level. I want to see more of that, of creating demand. We really have to create demand, physical place. And so my job every day is convincing these skeptics of the power of emotions. And so the only way I can do that is through humor and a couple of case studies. But within normally 15 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes, if that's all I have, I'll get them there. I'll get them there and I'll show them, because you can look at the results. You can go visit the projects. You can see the successes they've done. And I kind of think of it like a secret martial art that we have out there, and that, there are these things that we can do to make our retail places so much better that we're not doing, because we're deluded and distracted by chasing the other games that we're never going to win. Or very few of us are going to win.
Does I think about, we're talking about retail. That's kind of my area. I think about value retailers, discounters that don't have a lot of money to spend on making their stores look good. Are there things that you can do on a budget, or do you really have to have a budget and have resources to create a great place?
Now, I work a lot in the value sector. That the title of the book, I use the word extraordinary, and it's really a play off extraordinary. I'm fascinated as an architect, not with designing museums or civic centers or skyscrapers. What I'm really interested in is the everyday things that humans go through. I'm highly empathetic to the human condition of having to go to convenience stores or gas stations or dry cleaners, or even just the urban corridors we have to go through. And I don't like that my profession has abandoned these things that we do. They've considered it too lowbrow. That'd be if doctors said, I don't want to deal with regular people, I just want to do plastic surgery for the wealthy. We have to go in and fix all these places. And most of those places are value driven, price driven, but there's no reason that an experience has to be exhausting or draining. To accept that is apathetic. And so when we work with value based chains, the first thing we're looking at is, does the place wear me out? Is it exhausting? And normally what we do is follow customers. We follow them and we look at their involuntary eye movements, their behaviors, where they stand, where they sit, most importantly, how they come out of that store. And if they come out of that store looking like they've been flogged and beat down, then we know we're failing. Most of the time, like a lot of things, they'll start out with energy. And by the time they get to corner 3, they're wore out. So that's when we start to go, why? What are the reasons why? Most of them are physical. Some are social. Having to socially cooperate with people takes a lot of energy, particularly if the environment exacerbates that. Front end checkout of stores is one of the areas where people are most likely to fight. I've seen ministers get in fights. I've seen nuns get in fights. I've seen people say things they couldn't believe they'd say. You go, why? Are the people bad? No, the environment it is. Think about a typical grocery store, which is insanity. We ask people to come down these aisles, which are essentially like highways, to then come to a toll booth, which is the cashiers. And then we're going to create a crossroad in the middle of that toll booth. Everybody's carrying around a 200-pound cart, and they're about to touch the butt of somebody else with that cart, or they're not closing the gap. And the cashier leaves to go get change. And what do people do? They do this. It's fast. Can't believe it, right? Or somebody writes a check, right? Which we haven't seen in 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
These pinch points, we can't make them fast enough. It's almost like download speeds. We can't make download speed fast enough to satisfy people. What we have to do is get rid of wait. We have to treat the experience. We have to distract people and give them something to do. There's a reason why elevators have TVs or why subways have little TVs in them, because it helps us cope with being around other people. And one of the things that's extremely stressful for us in certain situations, to be clear, is having to cooperate with strangers. It's very stressful for us because we don't know them. We don't know who they are. And it makes us feel really, really weird. Now, ironically, people aren't very cooperative at checkout, but they tend to be much more social at seafood and butcher. You'll see customers talk to each other at the butcher area. And so one of the things we try to measure is when and where, and all types of projects we do, people are being socially cooperative and socially sharing with each other. Then we know we've done something. In our work with Whole Foods, there's a whole lot more of that happening than, say, a Kmart.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are just about out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Folks can find Irreplaceable on sale online. Is it available in stores? I should have asked.
Yes, of course. Of course.
Yes. So where all fine books are sold, you'll find Irreplaceable by Kevin Kelley. We all enjoyed it. We had Anna and Laura and I had been saying, hey, we need to do some kind of book club. And this popped up, and I was like, we should read this. This is perfect.
No, it is. And I have such respect for all three of you. And I hope this wasn't too much information. I'm obviously very passionate about it, but I feel honored to be in a room full of such distinguished people. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. And for all of our listeners and viewers out there, I'd love to meet you in person. I'm going to be speaking at the ICSC Southeast Conference in Atlanta, October 16th and 17th. Anna and Laura will also be there. There are a number of sessions that retail research folks specifically would be interested in. I'm going to be speaking about AI, the top 5 tools you can use with AI to increase your business. That should be fun. I keep telling people that's the most clickbaity title I've ever done. Then we're going to have a speaker on generational shifts in consumer behavior, retail research tools and data and analytics, plus a whole bunch of other retail real estate stuff. The conference is ICSC Southeast. If you're interested in attending, it's October 16th through 17th in Atlanta. Go to icsc.com and it's listed there under events. Just look for ICSC Southeast. If you like this podcast, do me a favor, go into the app that you're listening to and give us a rating or review. You can also subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app, in Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're also on the web at wherewebuy.show. If you've got any specific questions about retail real estate, or shopping centers, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for James Cook, JLL. And our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license. And that's a wrap.